Good morning. This is the Chucktown Wind Report Extended Outlook from Tuesday, July the 21st through Friday, July the 24th. So this week we have somewhat of a similar pattern to what we saw last week, where we have this undulating front to our northwest. And what I mean by undulating front is where you have a stationary boundary that sort of ripples in a wave-like fashion. Right now it looks a little bit more lined up, but yesterday we did see a little bit of a dip down into South Carolina, and some of this troughing pulled down that moisture down the mountain chain and into the southern Appalachians, so we were able to see more of a dip in that frontal boundary. Since then, overnight, it has lifted back to the north, but is expected to push back down to the south again. Now, this is mainly caused by the high pressure to the north and high pressure to the south that sort of bites down into these boundaries and makes them ripple. Now, what's unique about this particular one is we do have a zonal flow, and what I mean by a zonal flow is baroclinic zone in a meteorological term, where you have the winds line up ahead of a front. And when we have this occur, we have this sort of a westerly and west-southwest track of winds at the surface to mid-levels, and we will see some of this low-level troughing get pushed towards the coastline, which is exactly what we want for a stronger sea breeze, because that will help with the return flow over the ocean. Now, as we've talked about many times in the past with the sea breeze, this dotted line right here represents what the surface map is picking up as a Piedmont trough. Now, this trough could back inland through the morning and become more of a lee side trough of the Appalachian Mountains, and then we may just see sort of a mid-state Piedmont lee side trough for the day. And what that means is we'll have a good return flow from those convective areas of clouding to sort of push that wind out over the ocean and back into land to increase the sea breeze. So that's what we're expecting for today. We saw a pretty strong build yesterday, or a strong moderate build, where we got actually up right near 20 knots, especially during the evening surge. These evening surges are usually triggered by these frontal boundaries that are even in the periphery of the southeast region. We can see an inversion develop overnight, or a nocturnal jet develop. So we did see an evening surge from that, and then it's faded off and then built back in. We'll get to that in just a minute. So those are the main features. We have this Gulf of Mexico high pressure that is providing this kind of a westerly west-southwest zonal flow below the boundary, and then we have northerly winds pushing these boundaries down. Now they'll slowly make their way down into the southeast. Now let's get into our Bermuda high. It's very still pretty far removed over here. It's Bermuda Azores high at this time. You see a ridge axis down here. However, it is able to provide a synoptic flow, southerly flow up the coastline. So even though the surface map shows kind of it looks like a weakening pattern, it really is a large ridge of high pressure out there that is providing this southerly flow up the coast. It's a little bit stronger out in this area, so I'm expecting that gradient out there to be able to show stronger winds. But with this westerly flow, this southerly flow, where we have this inland troughing, Piedmont troughing, I think we're going to see a pretty healthy gradient today to be able to get some moderate numbers. That will probably fade out tomorrow as this boundary drifts to the south, and then our winds become more of a westerly and southwesterly flow. And as we saw last Wednesday, there was a little bit of a struggle between the two, but Wednesday ended up picking up and being decent overall, stronger moderate numbers, but there was an aggressive morning westerly wind that it had to fight for first. So sort of expecting a very, very similar pattern to last week. So let's talk about the jet stream, where I put this in motion. And the reason why I talk about the jet stream is because it's going to show where that frontal boundary, the behavior of the frontal boundary. Today we have a dip in the jet stream. Let me scoot on over to today. We see this dip in the jet stream right here. It's just enough to push that boundary a little further into the southeast, and you can see these upper level winds. This jet stream is 300 millibars. It's very high up, and these upper level winds are showing westerly nudge. So that means that the inland troughing that we see will have just a little bit of a nudge from the upper level winds towards the coastline. So everything is heading from west to east, and we do see, if we look forward, how the frontal boundary, the undulating frontal boundary, you can kind of get an idea of what's going on up high for those. And you can see this sort of a west-northwesterly push that'll keep pushing that boundary a little further down into the southeast, and then over time into Friday you can see a little bit more of a nudge from the northwest to the southeast, so that'll push the boundary even further. Don't want to get too much into the jet stream, but just wanted you to see that. So let's look at the earth.nullschool.net and put that in motion. We can see that very vast ridge of high pressure that I was talking about, the Bermuda Azores High, very far over here to the east, but you can definitely see that swing in the southerly winds, and it's actually joining this Gulf of Mexico high pressure ridge that's providing that west-southwesterly flow, and this will turn a little bit more onshore as the day goes on. Right now we're seeing this land breeze, west-southwesterly wind, and even westerly wind driving down the state right now. As the sun comes up and land heats, we'll see that wind turn more onshore. And you can see the two frontal boundaries, one right here, and then you see the other one right about here, with this high pressure driving down from the north. You see that clockwise rotation, that's high pressure. Okay, so let's go right to Charleston. I don't want to spend too much time on that. And we're going to go right into Folly Beach. Let's take a look and see what the inversion gave us last night, or our nocturnal jet. And we were seeing probably about 16, 17 knots for last night's jet. Once again, I've always kind of said that can be indicative of what the build is going to be for the daytime. However, I do think with the troughing setup that we have and a little bit of a zonal flow to help with those cloud tops and convections, I think that we may be able to get a little bit higher than this. It is good for guidance. I think that will be a good base for what we're going to see between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m. We saw a pretty healthy nocturnal jet. It didn't really peak out much more than 20 knots in gusts, but that could be indicative of what we're going to see for starters this afternoon, and it could build on that as we get into an evening surge, since that frontal boundary is in the vicinity. So that was Folly Beach. Let's take a quick look at Isle of Palms. And we see a little bit, quite a weaker jet north of the harbor. Sometimes we get a stronger jet north of the harbor and a weaker jet to the south. However, Folly Beach did feel a little bit stronger, the stronger winds last night. So take a quick look at the models while we're on Isle of Palms Pier. We'll let those load for just a moment. We have kind of a slow internet going on right now, so apologies there. There we go. All right, so here we go for the models. Now, what we see for today is we see the North American model 5 kilometer, this one in the green, is going pretty aggressive at this around 5 p.m. That just means it's a peak. It's showing peaks and valleys where these possible thunderstorms could be affecting the coast around 6 o'clock, 6 to 9 p.m. You can see how these models really drop off fast, and I think some of these are just picking up on thunderstorm activity able to cross over the coastline at this particular hour. If we have a strong enough sea breeze to undercut, it may be able to hold those storms inland. The inland troughing profile does look a little bit closer to the coast, so we'll have to watch for thunderstorms. The model guidance doesn't actually say it, but I can see that it is implied with these drop-offs in the models. I think the high resolution rapid refresh, this red one, you can see how there's some dips and valleys there where the sea breeze starts to get kicked off and then it dips and then comes back up again. That could also be showing some isolated thunderstorm activity in its modeling, where some of that moisture or higher convective potential is available over the coastline. So these models pick up on a lot of data to be able to come out with these reports, but we can't always take them at face value because of what they're, these dips and valleys. So I'm thinking that the North American model 5 kilometer between the high resolution rapid refresh 3 kilometer and the North American model, I think between the two of these is going to be a pretty good marker, and we could see some higher numbers actually than the North American model. We could get into the low 20s this afternoon, so that definitely is on the plate. So when we talk about the sea breeze, yesterday we had convective areas of clouding all along the sea breeze front area. We didn't see any thunderstorms. Most of the thunderstorms stayed down to the south. They were down over Tybee and South Georgia over Altamaha Sound and further removed. So today the storming profile is a little bit higher, so we could see some higher cloud tops, some definite thunderstorming. The winds aloft on the weather balloon readings last night showed lighter winds, so that means there isn't much shearing going on up top, and we could see that into today where these cloud tops are able to build very, very high. The sea breeze front stayed right about in this area. I could see the cloud buildups on visual observations, and so the return flows out over the ocean and back in were very healthy. We did have a westerly drive at the sort of a west or west-northwest drive at the low to mid levels, so that was helping to push those lower clouds over and get some of that higher air aloft and back out over the ocean for your return flows. And so that is pretty much the profile for today. I think that what we're looking at for this week is we're looking at today, I would say 15 to 19 knots with potential to get into the low 20s, especially during the evening surge. If we can get that, we could see a continuation for tomorrow. I think we're going to have a westerly flow fighting with a south-southwesterly flow as the sea breeze comes ashore, and then what we'll end up with is sort of a corkscrewing effect where the winds are going to struggle for a little while, and then eventually the sea breeze are going to win out, and so we'll have a stronger sort of pulsing along the coastline and probably more of a westerly flow inland. So that's what I think. The sea breeze front may penetrate somewhere into this area, and then we'll have some higher numbers right along the coastline just for the hours of the late to mid to late afternoon. So I'm thinking for today 15 to 19 knots. For Wednesday we should see 14 to 18 knots. I'm going to call it a little bit higher because I think the sea breeze will build off of those corkscrew winds from the west, and so I think 14 to 18 knots would be I think that would be called for Wednesday. When we get into Thursday with that undulating front, with that frontal boundary rippling down to the area, we start to get a little bit tricky where if the boundary does make it here, we're going to see more of a southeasterly wind just along or just below it. And as we get into Friday with that boundary just barely presses through the area, maybe down into South Carolina and northern Georgia, we're probably going to see an easterly flow start to develop for Friday and Saturday. Very similar to last week. So that will do it for the Chucktown Wind Report, and have a good week.